Welcome to the Modern Husbands Podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money and the home as a team. I'm Brian Page, founder of Modern Husbands. Sometimes our listeners want more support than a podcast can give, individual or couple support, which I provide as an accredited financial counselor and fair play facilitator. Details can be found at modernhusbands.com. For today's episode, we welcome Jennifer Sabatini Fraone, the former executive director for the Boston College Center for Work and Family. Jennifer received her BS in clinical psychology from Tufts University and her Master of Social Work and Master of Business Administration from Boston College. For today's episode, we discuss how organizations, couples, and families can find work-life harmony in their lives. Enjoy the show. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Brian, hi Bruce. I'm so glad to be here today.
Well, we're really thrilled to have you, and we want to jump straight into the questions because you're a wealth of knowledge, and I know our listeners are going to appreciate what you have to say. So let's start out with the fact that over your years at leading the Boston College Center for Work and Family, you have seen and experienced major shifts. What major shifts have you seen in how couples balance work and family life?
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show. And the Boston College Center for Work and Family has been around for 35 years. So we've seen a lot of progress made in the area of work and family. But when it started in 1990, the center was really squarely focused on working moms who had young children at home. Companies were seeing at that time that moms were, excelling at work. They were gaining more responsibility, higher level roles. And then when they had children, it became untenable and they would drop out of the workplace. So these organizations came together to form the center to figure out ways they could support moms so they could continue their careers and stay in the workplace. And so since then, we've seen a lot of shifts in terms of, who we acknowledge are the caregivers out there in the workplace. And a lot of the work we've done is around working dads, which is, so in alignment with the work that you're all doing. But Brad Harrington, who was the previous executive director and a professor at Boston College, noticed that for many years, he would be the only man in the room when people were talking about work-life issues. And he had an epiphany of sorts one day after coming back from one of these conferences on work and family, and he was the only man in the room, and basically thought that how can we solve this work-family issue if it's only women in the room talking about their work-family challenges? Men are parents as well. Men have work-life challenges as well. And so he started this decade-plus endeavor to research working dads and different aspects of their experience, just first of all, trying to validate that dads do have work-family struggles themselves and to get dads more engaged in the conversation. Also recognizing that most organizational leaders are dads, right? And if we want organizational change, if we want progress in organizational cultures, we need to engage with the leaders, and with the goal of getting more women into those leadership positions. But we need partnership between both genders in order to make that happen.
So, what do you think has been the most impactful research the center has published in the last 35 years or during your tenure?
Yeah, I would say building on that fatherhood research were several studies we've done on parental leave. So when we first did a widespread quantitative survey of dads in 2011, almost no dads had formal parental leave, or at the time would have been called paternity leave. Yep. Maybe the most generous companies were offering 2 weeks, but most people had either vacation time that they took, maybe 1 or 2 days of formal paternity leave. And so this became a real area of interest because we thought and hypothesized that, if dads had the opportunity to be more engaged right at the beginning of their child's life, to create that bond, to develop competence as a parent, that would follow through and they would be more involved and engaged all throughout their child's life. So we did a study in 2014 looking at, dad's desires for paternity leave. And, the results were pretty overwhelming, that dads all felt that paternity leave was important, but there was this disconnect because the companies weren't really offering paternity leave. And so the dads said that if they were looking for a new job, that would be something they would take into consideration. And so we, through data collection with a number of different dads, over 1,000 dads, had some real solid data to offer to organizations to help them create the business case for adding more paternity leave, which then has evolved even further into more of gender neutral bonding or parental leave, where either parent would get equal access to that parental leave. And now many of the companies we work with offer 8, 12, 16, 26 weeks of gender neutral parental leave. And we feel like because of our strong partnerships with these organizations that we did play a pretty direct role in pushing that progress forward. So, that by far has been the most impactful work that we've done.
That's really awesome. I know even within the kind of, since I'm in the university setting, generally there is pretty good parental and maternal leave policies. But you made me think about talking about that study back in like 2014. So I took a course back in my doctoral program over a decade ago, but it was called just Fatherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I remember on that first week is the professor said, we are going to read every research study that's ever been written about fatherhood. And I was like, oh crap, this class is going to have tons of reading. And it was less than 20 articles. It was like less than 20 research articles up to that date had been done exclusively on fatherhood, fathers, parental leave, like anything. So like you're doing amazing work. I like, I love to hear it because it is such a need out there, right? Brian, you're a father. Like, how important is this to you?
I think one of the things that needs to be broadly addressed, which I'm sure you have addressed, but is that we have experienced this shift in the workplace where women are now earning roughly the same or significantly more than their husbands in around half of dual income households. And women are outpacing men as college graduates at every level. And while this is occurring, these are all signs of progress. What has been lagging are the systems at home that empower couples to be able to support what's occurring in the workplace. And a large part of that is the role that men play in caregiving. And I think that I have fond memories of my father and I backpacking at Red River Gorge or tossing the baseball back and forth. But those are the moments of fatherhood that are joyful, but that's not necessarily reflective of the overall grind of caregiving. The hours that are required to be an equal contributor to being a caregiver, including taking your child to the doctor, where
I've had a doctor say, should we call your wife and ask her what she thinks? Or telling the school that you're the primary point of contact if something happens and they still contact your wife. Like, these are the things that I think need to change more quickly, because it's not only frustrating when you're both working and don't have a lot of time to work through those challenges, but it also reinforces the stereotypical gender norms that we're trying to get away from because they are irrational in the current work environment.
I totally agree with you. And those gender norms are very sticky. And I think they're kind of ingrained in people's minds. And I think we are seeing some movement in the right direction. But I do think organizations can really have a role in acknowledging that dads are also caregivers, and when they provide work-family supports, encouraging men to use them as well, to try to move toward those more egalitarian relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, so speaking of which, Jennifer, like, what are the biggest stressors that you found that high-achieving dual career couples face today? And then how can we navigate them without burning out?
That's a great question. I think high achieving couples are faced with many pressures from all different directions. First of all, from employers who are consistently trying to do more with less. So people feel like they need to work long hours to accomplish what they need to do. And the recent return to office mandates, I feel, have exacerbated some of these stressors. Some of the jobs where people are being forced to commute back into the office are not necessary for collaboration or for serving the customers. So I feel very strongly about looking at job roles and, seeing what kind of flexibility can be offered there. But these return to office mandates really disproportionately impact people who are parents or caregivers. There's such a high cost and lack of quality childcare. And I think, it's easy to say everyone come back into the office, but on the back end, parents are really struggling with this, and there's not enough empathy from organizations when it comes to that. I think there's also this societal pressure to be this super parent. Your child has to go to the right schools, excel in athletics, and, be a musical prodigy. And overall have an Instagram worthy life. And I think that as parents, we need to be very aware of those pressures, and where we can set some boundaries and push back and really try to do what's meaningful for us as parents and how we want to shape our family and resist a lot of those societal pressures. And I think couples need to be very intentional about creating a vision for what they want their family to look like and try to keep that in alignment as much as possible. But really, when is there time to do that, right? To have those serious conversations when you're exhausted and overwhelmed, but you do have to try to carve out that time, because there's always going to be pressure coming from different angles. But if you are a unit that has kind of your core values and your vision defined, it makes it easier to say yes at the right times and no at other times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've become very, very competitive as a society. And it's not just competition for our kids, but competition just as, parents have this competition, like who is parenting better almost. And I think it's accentuated so much through social media.
Mm-hmm.
these days. Like you mentioned, just having that perfect Instagram life, and we don't have that time just to sit back and align ourselves with really our values and, as you said, are your vision, that what you want.
And,
Now,
and I have to add, I've got 3 kids, and one of the things that really frustrated me is that so many parents schedule every free moment for their children growing up now,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think that that's healthy. Like I feel like that a lot of my development stems from the hours that I spent sun up to sundown in the summers, or after school when I was a kid, playing at Smith Park with like 20 other kids that are about the same age. Whatever season it was, football, basketball, baseball, you just knew you had to be home for dinner. And if the weather wasn't great and we weren't playing a sport, you just found wherever the bicycles were in the front yard, and that's where you were hanging out. And in the summer, you weren't allowed to come in all sweaty and stuff, so you drank water out of the faucet. We turned out fine. We were great. And now every single thing includes some adult over our shoulder micromanaging us, and that comes at a cost. That comes at a cost for parents who have to drive them there and pick them up. That comes at a financial cost for parents paying for these things. And like there's this belief that that's somehow going to lead to better outcomes for kids. And I'm not sure I'm buying that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I taught for 15 years, and I ran a big select soccer club, and I can tell you firsthand that a lot of the greatness that we see on television from athletes comes from God-given talent. And the same thing with like some of the academic folks who are excelling. I'm not suggesting in any way that education and professional training is not important, but I think that the pendulum has swung far too wide to the side of everything being organized, scheduled, and specialized, and that's putting a lot of pressure on parents.
Yeah, and at what expense? Because you think about, your weekends, for instance. I have friends who have children in, high level soccer, and they might have 4 games on a weekend, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. When do you have family downtime to have a nice meal together, to just roll around in the leaves in the fall, to do kind of those more relaxed and, as you were saying, unorganized kind of just naturally occurring activities? There isn't much time left for that anymore, and I think it's really taking a toll, and it's making the children feel more pressured as well.
Listeners have told us that they love the ideas we share on our podcast to manage money in the home as a team, but want more help than one episode can provide. That's why I'm excited to announce On the Same Page Consulting for corporations, couples, and individuals. Visit modernhusbands.com and click Our Services at the top of the page to learn more about how I can help you or your employees manage money in the home as a team. Again, that's modernhusbands.com. Now back to the show.
Well, so I know your research has explored changing gender norms. So how are men's roles in caregiving and domestic life evolving? And what still needs to change?
Yeah, so we could see, over the decades that men were putting in more time into household and caregiving duties. The Pew Research Center kind of tracks that at various intervals. But during the pandemic, obviously, there was a huge shift, and, dads were at home. And they really relished and enjoyed that additional time with their children when they were at home during the pandemic. So colleagues of ours, Richard Petz and Dan Carlson, who are 2 professors who also study dads, probably after the research papers that you had reviewed in your doctoral program. But so they looked at that early phase during the pandemic and found that dad's share of housework and childcare increased quite a bit at that time. And then the results showed that those dads who were doing more domestic labor, their partners had increased life satisfaction. So we had, the dads around more, stepping up more, that made their wives happier, right? And so after the pandemic, with return to office efforts, dads really have wanted to hold on to more of that time. They got a taste of it, enjoyed being more engaged and involved. But of course, now there are all of these pressures to return back to the office and, get back to normal, if you will. And I think, there is no normal anymore. I think people are advocating for themselves more. They're saying, I need to leave to go pick up my child or, go to their event. And I think dads have become more willing to, step up. I do think they're still experiencing some stigma and some pushback, but I think as we try to normalize dads as caregivers, the stigma is decreasing, and the more men that speak up prominently, especially if they're leaders, people will follow suit. And it's kind of the same with parental leave. There was a study a couple years ago that showed that, when there was a high-level executive dad who took the full paternity leave at the company, it was much more likely that other men in the company would follow that example. So somebody has to say, this is okay. Like, yes, we have the policy, and yes, we actually want you to use the policy, and we will set you up for success in using the policy. And then men, really want to be able to take that time with their families.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. And that, I mean, the more people do it, the more it becomes normalized, and not just at that company, but just societally, culturally as well. You mentioned that return to office, but we do have these remote and hybrid work kind of possibilities now that supposedly promise flexibility a lot, but it often leads to kind of blurred boundary lines. What have you learned about how couples can protect their personal time while also working flexibly?
Yeah, so I think, there's always the worry of that creeping of work into our personal lives. Since we have our devices with us constantly, we have access to it constantly. Yeah. So we need to be much more intentional.
24/7 now.
Right. We need to be very intentional about setting those boundaries. So, there's no doubt, if you're working remotely or hybrid, avoiding a commute, whether it's every day if you're fully remote or even a couple days a week, can give you a lot more time back and potentially even save you a lot of money. That you could dedicate to your family. But what ends up happening is those hours that you would have spent commuting often end up being work time and not time for yourself. So you really need to be intentional about setting those boundaries, blocking off your calendar. Like, if family dinner is important to you, and sitting down with your family, whether it be once a week or every night, schedule it on your calendar, block it off, put your phone, on the other counter. Don't make it easy for it to encroach in your life. We see it everywhere. You go out to a restaurant, people are sitting together, but they're looking at their devices. So I think having a healthier relationship with your device can actually help a lot with maintaining those boundaries, because if we allow it to happen, we'll be just engaging constantly with work, as opposed to carving out that time with our families. And I would say, working with your partner to enable you each to have some time for self-care. I think what ends up happening is that's one of the first things to go. And especially for women, they have a tendency to feel guilty for taking time for themselves, whether it be, to go out for a run or meet a friend or whatever the situation is. But I think having conversations with your partner about saying, like, for me to thrive, I need to get out and run for 45 minutes every morning. Like, can we work together to make that happen? And then in turn, I want to be there for you so you can do the things that bring you energy. And again, scheduling those times into the calendar. So it's not kind of like by a whim. It's like, this self-care is important to me being the best parent, the best worker, the best person I can be. And so let's work together to make sure we each get that time.
So, like, with that in mind, I guess if you could redesign the ideal workplace for modern families, what would it look like? How would you reshape the home lives then of these dual career couples?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been a real big advocate of part-time work all throughout my career. I've gotten hired for several jobs on a part-time basis, but it's an extreme rarity out there. And I think there's like this whole FTE model. If your whole workplace is based on full-time equivalents and the benefits that go with that. So it's been tough to move that needle, but I feel like if parents had more options about the amount that they work and could still earn, a living to support their families, that would enable families more of an opportunity to thrive. So, we see people doing this on their own now with gig work or fractional positions, or there's been a little bit of movement toward a 4-day work week. But truly, most people feel like, they've got to give 40 or in some cases 50 or 60 hours a week to the workplace. And it's just really difficult to have two high-level careers where people are working, on all gears there. And I think it's a missed opportunity for organizations to leverage some great talent. There are so many people who may have opted out of the workplace, especially now with the return to office mandates and childcare being so expensive. But if they had a professional part-time option, they could be contributing their talent instead of completely opting out. So I think, there would be an economic benefit if companies could figure this out. But I would say more generally, I think working on company culture and having a culture that appreciates that caregiving is an important role in people's lives, promoting caregiver allyship, encouraging managers to approach their employees with empathy, looking at a wide array of benefits that companies can offer to support their working caregivers, whether that be mental health support, both for the caregiver themselves and all their family members, generous parental leave. Now more of the companies we work with are also providing caregiver leave in case you have a child who's ill and needs to be in the hospital. You can take that time off paid, or it could be your elderly parent is at the end of life and you really want to be with them, having the ability to take that paid time off. So there are kind of the overall supportive culture, but then underneath that are these benefits that we see progressive companies offering that I hope will take hold in all kinds of companies, large and small.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned this part-time work, as like I've been reading a lot about the concept of like phased retirement. And so there's a lot of companies on board for their employees that are ready to retire or about that retirement age to go into this kind of semi-part-time, semi-retirement, and they're okay with that, but they're not necessarily okay with, like, at those pivotal moments in the family lifespan, like for that kind of phased employment time while you're while you're raising your children, and why it's important to be there for that caregiving role.
Yeah, and we're seeing some companies doing like a phased return to work after parental leave for a relatively short period of time. But I think, I would advocate even further. I mean, when you have a toddler or, a 5-year-old, there may be a phase where, you might want to ramp back a little bit, but to have to step completely out of the workplace, disadvantages your family in terms of income, but the company could also be losing a terrific employee who would be more than happy to work 3 days a week, but just 5 days may be untenable for them.
Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, the centers closed at the end of 2025, right? So how did you prepare for this upcoming transition after this work being such an integral part of your life for the last 20 years?
Yeah, it's kind of a sad, very bittersweet moment for us at the center. There are a lot of external factors that contributed to the center closing, but we recently held a symposium and a celebration just to acknowledge the great impact that the center has had for 35 years. We brought together our corporate partners, the academic thought leaders who we've partnered with and who will continue to do work in this space, and had just a really great day of looking forward and kind of creating a vision for what happens next in the work family space. So I felt very gratified to be a part of that process. As far as myself, my own identity has been so tied in with the center for 20 years. So, I've had a wonderful opportunity to meet so many great people and have established a wonderful network. So I'll definitely be, kind of tapping into those people as I re-envision what I want to do next. But I'm especially passionate about that family building time, whether it's, fertility and, going into that preparation for parental leave or the transition back for parental leave. So I could see myself working somehow in that space. I've also recently this semester started teaching at Boston College a class for seniors called Work-Life Harmony to help prepare them to go out and have a meaningful and fulfilling life beyond just a career, but creating a life vision that incorporates, some of the things that we've been talking about, parenting and all of that. And so I've enjoyed that. I may want to do something around that as well.
I love the fact you call it life harmony, not work-life balance, because there's no such thing as work-life balance.
Yes, absolutely. It's just kind of flips it a little bit and makes it seem a little bit less of a competition.
Yeah. And I think it takes away that competitive stigma with it. Absolutely. I was going to say the exact same thing, Brian. So as we always like to close with, what is one piece of simple and actionable advice you'd like to share with our listeners before we end today?
Yeah, I would say kind of related to the class is to take time at moments in your life for real deep self-reflection, as well as reflecting with your partner. We talked a little bit about making sure you're values and actions are aligned. And you have to be really purposeful and intentional about that. It doesn't just kind of
Mhm.
fall into place without, being very deliberate. So, and then beyond kind of the everyday tasks that parents are sharing, kind of the hands-on work, I think paying attention to the mental load is very important. And I know you recently spoke with a colleague who I held in very high esteem, Julie Wayne, who's done excellent work on the invisible family load. But I think that, having those reflective moments with your partner, and asking them, what is stressing them out, what is keeping their wheels churning at night, and finding ways that partners can alleviate some of that mental strain for each other. It's very easy to say, oh, I'll cook tonight, or I'll pick the kids up, I'll take the trash out. But you really have to have some maybe uncomfortable conversations with your partner to say, I can really see the stress is taking a toll on you. Is there something that I can take on that will help you feel more at ease, and less stressed out? And it may not be anything hands-on. It might just be like, I just need an afternoon to myself to just escape everything and go for a long hike in the woods, or whatever it might be. But making sure to pay attention to not just those day-to-day tasks, but the mental and cognitive load that parenting and caregiving takes.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. There was obviously so much here for all of us to chew on as we reflect on this podcast episode with you, and how we can figure out ways to find greater work-life harmony in our relationships, and obviously in our professions. So thank you again, Jennifer, for joining today.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed our conversation.
Don't leave just yet. Be sure to like and subscribe before you do. And a reminder to visit modernhusbands.com if you're looking for money and home management support in your life. Just click the Our Services button at the top of the page. Again, that's at modernhusbands.com. And many thanks to our co-hosts, our guests, and of course, all of you for joining today.